this area. Hey, I'm Sapphire. Want to hear something scary? You've heard of the Slender Man, but have you heard of the tall, slender woman? This next chapter is a Japanese urban legend called Hachishaku-sama, which means 8 feet tall. My grandparents lived in a small village in Japan. Every summer, my parents would take me there on holiday to visit them. The last time I saw them was the summer when I was 8 years old. My grandparents were inside the house, and I was playing by myself outside in the backyard. I heard a strange sound. I didn't know what it was, and it was hard to figure out where it was coming from. I was looking around, searching for the source of the noise, when I noticed something on top of the tall hedges that enclosed the backyard. It was a straw hat. It wasn't resting on the hedge, it was behind it. That's where the sound was coming from. Then the hat began to move. It stopped at a small gap in the hedge, and I could see a face peering through. It was a woman, but the hedges were high, almost 8 feet tall. I was surprised at how tall the woman was. I wondered if she was wearing stilts or some sort of huge high-heeled shoes. Then, a split second later, she walked off, and the strange noise disappeared with her, fading into the distance. Confused, I got up and ran back into the house. My grandparents were in the kitchen drinking tea. I sat down at the table and told my grandparents what I had seen. They weren't really paying attention to me until I mentioned that distinctive sound. They both froze. Grandma's eyes grew wide and she covered her mouth with her hand. Grandpa's face became very serious and he grabbed me by the arm. "This is very important," he said, very intensely. How tall was she? As tall as the garden hedge? Where was she standing? When did this happen? What did you do? Did she see you? I tried to answer all his questions as best as I could. He rushed out to the hallway and made a phone call. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but after he hung up, he walked out the door. "Grandma, what's going on?" "There's something dangerous abducting children in this area," she said. "We call it Hachishaku-sama. It takes on the appearance of an extremely tall woman and says, in a deep voice. A long time ago, it was captured by monks and they managed to confine it in a ruined building on the outskirts of the village. They trapped it using 4 jizo, small religious statues that they placed at the north, south, east, and west of the ruins so that it could not escape. But somehow, it did. The last time it appeared was 15 years ago. My grandmother said that anyone who saw it was destined to die within a few days. It all sounded so crazy. I wasn't sure what to believe. Just then, my grandpa came back, but with an old woman who called herself Keisan. They took me upstairs to my bedroom and began covering the windows with newspaper, with ancient runes written all over them. Keisan placed small bowls of salt in all 4 corners of the room and a small Buddha figure in the center.
"Soon the sun will be setting, so listen carefully. You must stay in this room until 7:30 tomorrow morning. Do not open this door for any reason."
She placed a bucket in my hand.
"Not even to use the restroom."
My grandparents and Keisan left the room, and I locked the door after them. I couldn't believe what was happening. Was I really going to die in a few days? I turned on the TV to try to take my mind off everything, and eventually fell asleep. I was awakened around 1 a.m. by a tapping sound on the window. It's probably just a tree or something, I told myself. Then came a knock on the door, and I heard my grandpa's voice. "Are you okay in there? If you're scared, I can come keep you company." Hearing his voice was such a relief that without thinking, I rushed over to the door. But something didn't feel right. I looked at the bowls of salt in the room. All 4 of them had turned black. And then I heard the sound again. The tapping on the window continued. I knelt in front of the Buddha and began to pray. I was so terrified and caught up in my chanting that I didn't realize the sounds had stopped. I checked my watch. It was 7:30 a.m. Carefully, I opened the door and ran to my grandparents. We all got in a van and headed straight for the airport. Apparently, there were others who had escaped the grasp of Hachishaku-sama, as long as they never stepped foot in Japan again. So 2 years ago, when my grandpa got sick, he refused to let me visit him. He even left strict instructions in his will to not let me attend his funeral. I couldn't believe that this creature prevented me from saying goodbye to him. So when my grandma called a few days ago to tell me she had been diagnosed with cancer, I wasn't going to let her stop me from visiting. It's been 10 years, Grandma, and nothing has happened to me. We don't even know if this thing is real. I'm not going to let it stop me from seeing you. If you say so, dear. I love you, Grandma. I'll see you soon. Like this video if it gave you the chills, and don't forget to subscribe to Snarled and our sister channel.
The princess is my friend. I like when she's around.
Hey, I'm Sapphire. Want to hear something scary? I asked you to send in your personal paranormal stories, and you did not disappoint. All the chapters in this next volume are true stories submitted by you. Our first chapter comes from Orchid, a Hmong shamanist who had a special friend she called Princess. When Orchid was 6 years old, her dad went on vacation to Minnesota to visit some relatives. When he returned, he brought back many gifts, among other things. Her family had a small chicken farm where they raised the birds for meals. Orchid was used to seeing her parents bring a chicken inside when it was time to eat. But the day her dad came back from his trip, there was a strange black bird on his arm. All of their chickens were white, so Orchid was puzzled. This bird looked like a crow. It was all black, including its beak, except its eyes were red. Her dad and the bird disappeared into the kitchen.
Mommy, what's that bird Daddy was carrying?
What are you talking about?
Daddy was holding a black bird.
Her mom went into the kitchen to see what she was talking about, but all she saw was her dad. There was no black bird in sight. That night, Orchid slept in her parents' bedroom. For whatever reason, she woke up in the middle of the night and sat up. She noticed something behind the curtains in front of the window. It was a girl who looked like she was about 12 years old. She was just standing there, staring at Orchid with her hollow black eyes. Orchid stared back at her, wondering what she was going to do. But she just stood there. Eventually, Orchid fell back asleep. The next morning, Orchid was drawing a picture. What a pretty girl. Who is that? Her mom asked.
This is Princess.
Her mom thought nothing of her daughter's cute drawing until she started seeing it everywhere. Pages and pages of drawings of Princess all over the house. She was even on the walls and the bedroom pillows. Orchid, you can't be drawing on everything.
The princess is my friend. When she's around.
Her family was pretty disturbed by Orchid's sudden new obsession. But weeks later, her mother realized that there had to be a connection to Princess and the black bird. Orchid's family was practitioners of Hmong shamanism. Whenever you go on a trip, you must ask the spirits to not come back home with you. And Orchid's father had forgotten to do so. They suspected that Princess was a lost soul who attached herself to Orchid's father. They decided to perform uane, a shamanic ritual to heal those battling with a spirit. Because if Orchid continued to spend time with Princess, there was a good chance she could be dragged into the spirit world forever. Orchid was placed in front of the altar, and a shaman healer rang bells and chanted around her to enter the spirit realm. Once the shaman made the journey into the other world, he was able to interact and communicate with the spirit of Princess. After the ritual, the shaman healer asked Orchid, "Where is Princess now?" Orchid said nothing and started tearing up. "What's the matter?"
I don't want to talk about Princess.
"Why not?"
She says she can't play with me anymore because she's dead.
A very special thank you to Orchid for sharing this story with me. And another special shout out to Ashley Burrell for her continued support of the show. Like this video if it gave you the chills. And don't forget to subscribe to Snarled and our sister channels Hissy Fit and Slay Tricks. And if you dare to follow me, stick around after this episode for an announcement. Hey, I'm Sapphire. Want to hear something scary? We close this volume with a story from the No Sleep subreddit, written by username The Thing That Will. I grew up in a tiny town in Vermont. Tiny in terms of population, not size. There were huge, sprawling farms and wooded areas, but almost no people. My only close friend was Tina. We spent almost all our time with each other, constantly dreaming about life outside of Vermont. The people in our town were strange folk, different than in other places. One thing I didn't realize about small towns until I moved to the city is how incredibly superstitious the people could be. They believed in the strange, the paranormal. They believed in Luvia. Luvia was an older French-Canadian woman who had moved to Vermont when she met her husband. And everyone in town wholeheartedly believed that she was clairvoyant. So Tina and I decided to go see her one evening for a reading. I was skeptical, but it seemed like a fun thing to do, as a joke. We dropped by her house in the early evening, and she opened the door as we walked up the pathway to her house, before we even had a chance to knock. Tina elbowed me hard in the ribs and whispered that Luvia was clearly a psychic. She sensed us coming to the door. I whispered back that it probably had more to do with her house being full of windows, and the fact that she probably saw us coming from a long way away. Either way, I started to feel strange the minute we got close to her. She was very, very old, very tiny, and kind of sunken. Sunken eye sockets and sharp cheekbones and a sort of concave chest cavity. It was more than a little unnerving. But she smiled and was sweet to us, and I started to warm up to her. Nothing about her or her house screamed creepy psychic to me. Just a well-dressed older woman in a cabin-style house. We told her that we were interested in a reading and handed her about $20 that we had gathered together between the two of us. "What can you tell me about my love life?" Tina asked. Luvia had no crystal ball, tarot cards, or tea leaves. She just closed her eyes and sat silently for about 2 minutes. "Michael Carton, the man you're going to marry. Michael Carton." Tina thanked her and repeated the name to herself a few times. Michael Carton. Michael Carton. Luvia then turned to me. She looked straight into my eyes, grabbed my hands, and said, "The thing that will kill you is shedding its skin. The thing that will kill you is sharpening its teeth. The thing that will kill you is washing the blood off of its claws. The thing that will kill you is gathering skins. The thing that will kill you, you won't see it coming." The three of us sat there in silence for quite a while. I felt sick, shaken up. Luvia looked as if she wished she didn't have to tell me that. "Is there anything I can do to stop it?" Luvia slid our money back across the table to us. "No charge for the reading." Tina and I slunk out of Luvia's house quietly. We didn't say a word on the way back to our houses. Tina just found out the name of the love of her life. I got to listen to a horrifying cryptic message about my death. I was only 12 years old. For years, I looked for it. The thing that will kill me. I could almost feel it. Sense it just behind each car, swaying behind the trees at night. With every step, I hesitated. Every time I tried to sleep, I could almost see it. What had she said about its teeth? But I never found it. When I was 18, I left for college in California to get far away from the snow and the cold and the thing that will kill me. People in California laughed when I told them the story, and it stopped seeming real. Just the ramblings of a tiny, ancient French-Canadian woman. It wasn't real. When I was 27, a wedding invitation came in the mail. Tina was getting married. This was the first I had heard of it. I was still in California and barely kept in contact with anyone from back east. It seemed like a past life. "You are cordially invited to the wedding of Michael Carton and Tina." Wait. No. She had the name in her mind. Michael Carton. And she sought him out. It had nothing to do with Luvia. Her predictions weren't real. They couldn't be.
Yo, keys. What?
Clairvoyants don't exist, right? I went to the wedding. Tina, Michael, and I laughed about the whole thing. The psychic knew. She predicted it. Of course course she didn't. Tina and Michael decided it was nothing more than a funny story to tell their future children. Just tell us if you run into some beast with razor-sharp teeth that's gathering skins, okay? I left the wedding as sure as I ever was that the thing that will kill me wasn't real. I didn't know why I had been scared so long. The best thing about Tina's wedding was that we got back in touch for the first time in a very long time. We were very different people than we had been as children, but we still shared more of a bond than we realized. She was happy living in Vermont with Michael. As the years went on, her calls and emails got less and less frequent. She always seemed to be busy. Soon, they tapered off completely. I missed her, of course, but I had my own life. One winter, I came into town to visit my parents for the holidays and decided I'd swing by Tina's house. I normally never just drop by, but she was pretty bad about answering her phone and I really wanted to see her. I pulled up to her and Michael's house. 2 cars were in the driveway, so I figured they were both home. I walked up and rang the doorbell. Michael opened it, dressed in several layers and a large coat, as if he had just come in from the snow. He looked very surprised to see me. He invited me inside. He took off his coat and hung it on a coat rack by the door and asked if I had talked to Tina recently. I haven't actually, not in several months. Sorry for the invasion. I don't usually just drop by like this, but I just wanted to see her. Is she here? I figured you'd know, that you might have heard. She left me a few months ago. Hasn't spoken to me since. Oh God, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. Then whose car was in the driveway? I'm sorry, I was about to get ready for bed. I've got an early work day tomorrow. Do you mind? He kicked off his shoes, pulled his sweater off, and headed toward his bathroom. I settled in and looked around their home. So, do you know where she lives now? I don't. She didn't call until after she was gone. He started flossing, and when he saw me looking toward him, closed the door for privacy. When I heard the shower water start running, I pulled out my phone, figuring I'd take this time to look through Tina's last messages to me to see if she gave any hint to where she went, any clue. My phone fell out of my hand as I grabbed it out of my bag, and I saw it drop beneath the couch. As I felt around under the couch for my phone, my hand hit something else. A massive clump of long hair. Brown hair. Like Tina's. Hair with a piece of scalp still attached. The thing that will kill you is gathering skins. I turned toward the bathroom door. Michael was still showering. The thing that will kill you is washing the blood off of its claws. Flossing. Brushing. The thing that will kill you is sharpening its teeth. Sloughing off his outer clothes. The thing that will kill you is shedding its skin. Oh God. The thing that will kill me. The water in the shower stopped. I ran out the door, slammed the door, sprinted to my car, shaking, watching the door. My hands fumbled with keys, shaking. The door to the house opened. My car started. I drove. I didn't look back. I just kept driving all through the night. Through most of the next day, only stopping when I absolutely had to. I had no idea if he was following me. I had no idea what I had just seen. My heart didn't start beating normally again until I was 2 states away. I went home. This was months ago. I called the police. They investigated. Nothing turned up. They're sure she just left him, moved away. Maybe she did. Maybe she's far away. Safe. Maybe nothing's coming for me. Maybe Michael's just a poor guy whose wife left him. Maybe it's nothing behind the trees, in the snowdrifts, underneath the cars, outside my door at night, in the windows. Maybe it's nothing. Probably, it's nothing. Luvia's been wrong before. Hasn't she? The thing that will kill you. You won't see it coming. This is the last episode of Something Scary, for now. I've truly enjoyed bringing your stories to life and giving you the chills for the past 1.5 years. If you want to stay updated on my future endeavors, take a moment to make sure you're following me and your notifications are turned on.
Jimmy? Who's Janessa?
That's my cousin.
Oh, okay. You can go back to bed. I'm sorry.
Hey, I'm Sapphire. Want to hear something scary? Our next story comes from Jeannie, whose daughter has a very interesting friend. Jeannie and her daughter, Azura, used to live in Brazil with the rest of their extended family. Azura was a bright little girl who was always happy and energetic and had no trouble making friends. But when she turned 7, something changed. She was no longer interested in playing with her friends and became cold and distant to everyone, including her mother. Azura would curl up in her bedroom alone, and Jeannie would overhear her talking to herself for hours. Jeannie thought Azura might be going through a phase and invented an imaginary friend for herself. But Azura's grandmother thought otherwise. That's because one night, Azura's grandmother walked by the bedroom where Azura was talking to herself. She stopped in the doorway and looked into the room and screamed. Azura turned and hissed at her grandma like a rabid animal and crouched on all fours, growling deeply. Her grandmother ran out of the room and locked the door from the outside. Jeannie, you have to call the priest now. There is a demon in this house. Jeannie is not a religious woman. She thought her mother was being a little dramatic, but nevertheless, she called a priest to come over to the house. He arrived the next morning, and the grandmother explained what she saw. There was a demon with big bat wings and cloven hooves. Its skin was dark and scaly, and its hands had giant talons. Jeannie just snickered at this description. The grandmother unlocked the door, and there was Azura, crying hysterically. Don't go! Don't go, please, don't go, no, please, don't go, don't go, don't go, don't go, please don't go. The moment he saw this, the priest dropped his Bible and rosary and closed the door. That's no demon. That's a mancha chico. A what? It is a creature that is born from a demon and cursed without love. They seek out mortals to love them and attach themselves to those who show them kindness. Jeannie laughed. This was absolutely ridiculous. When they fall in love with a human, they truly care for them and keep them safe, but for a price. In return for their devotion, the Mancha Chico will gain possession of the human soul in the afterlife. We have to save her. The priest re-entered the bedroom and said a prayer. When he came out of the room, Jeannie saw Azura sleeping peacefully in her bed. A few days later, Jeannie was about to run some errands, and Azura stopped her. Don't leave. But sweetie, I need to buy us some. Please! Jeannie was a little freaked out by how sincere her daughter was, so she stayed home. Later that day, when they were watching the news, they learned that there was an active shooter at the nearby mall, the mall that Jeannie was going to go to. Why did you make me stay home?
Cheliso told me to tell you. He doesn't want me to be sad, so he will help me keep you safe.
There were multiple instances like this when Azura would tell her mother to avoid a certain area, only to later discover that it could have saved her life. And Jeannie wasn't the only one who was experiencing good luck. Azura's school bullies had stopped picking on her and began apologizing to her and giving her gifts. Azura was hit by a car on the sidewalk and flown into a gutter, but walked away without a scratch. Azura's little sister was diagnosed with a terrible skin disease, only to have it completely healed a few weeks later. To Jeannie, it was all just good luck. But according to Azura, this was all because of Cheliso, her demon. Years had gone by, and Azura was now 15 years old. Jeannie found it a little odd that her daughter had never talked about any school crushes or shown any interest in dating, so she decided to talk to her daughter. You know, when I was your age, I couldn't stop talking about boys. Is there anyone you like at your school? You can tell me. I have Cheliso. He says I'm his one and only, and it'd be wrong to leave him when he's been so good to me. Hasn't he been good to us, Mama? Jeannie did not like that response. She thought that her daughter had finally grown out of this ridiculous phase, and she couldn't stand these lies anymore. Enough, Azura, enough with Cheliso. He isn't real. I don't ever want to hear about Cheliso again. You understand? Jeannie stormed out of the room, leaving Azura in tears. After she had cooled down, Jeannie decided to apologize to her daughter. She entered her bedroom and froze. There was Azura, curled up on her bed, but in the lap of a giant demon. He looked just as Azura's grandmother had described years ago. Jeannie couldn't believe what she saw. there he was. Chaliso was real. Azura is now 22 years old and only occasionally mentions Chaliso. And Jeannie will remind her that Chaliso plans to take her soul in the afterlife. And you're okay with that? Of course. Hasn't he been good to us, Mama? A very special thank you to Jeannie, Azura, and Chaliso, who, according to Azura, is a fan of Snarled. Want Snarled, Slay Tricks, or Something Scary merch? Visit our